Synergetic Century, May 9 through 10, 2017. Omniscient Universe Church 14. With respect to truth. With respect to truth, which recently many of us have newly learned, is spontaneous, whereas lying must be learned, all of which apparently is relative to tolerance. But concerning the synergetically, spontaneously tolerated residual error, that is, perpetuating an increase of the magnitude tolerance of the residual inaccuracies by cultivated adaptation to the manifest forms, from such inceptions, the cultivated errors could not be true, not of the truth, and therefore misdirect our humanity's conscious evolution, omniconsiderate, problem-solving, economic initiatives. Then there must be some confusion about this, as humans misunderstand nature's spontaneously tolerated residual error that constantly diminishes. When consciously spontaneous, I imagine, it must be a focused awareness of nature's synergy and energy, syntropy and entropy, the syntropic and entropic truth of universe. Is this typically a focused propensity correlative to anti-entropy? Who amongst our peers understands anything about entropy as the law of increasing the random element? At first glance, here and for most of us, the conceptuality of this term entropy is quite foreign, and we know less about anti-entropy. Altogether, it means we know very little about the truth of universe's nature, as we unwittingly agree to increasing the magnitude tolerance of the residual inaccuracies of the reenacting articulations that in effect supplant truth with imagination's fabricated derivations. As a result, truth, which over the centuries is attributed to the authority of religion and of justice, has been, without realizing that truth is a direction, a relationship, a conceptuality of zero phase beyond the numerical symbol for zero. Truth is cosmically total, to put it another way. Conceptually, truth relates to alternate transformative options, Synergetics 217.01. The options are of ever more refining degrees, including awareness of the metaphysical. Without metaphysical generalized conceptioning, could intellect clearly imagine continually improving the information scenario while also anticipating the discovery of new, realized, generalized principles? At best, and from histories of decision-making based on precedent-setting law, justice everywhere in the world treats truth exclusively to tolerance degrees of exploitable satisfaction as a property of its right to judge. Justice, as a proponent of increasing the tolerance magnitude, can omit by default precedent-setting exemplifications of previous experiences, the absolute truth's omni-zero phase condition. It is through which the metaphysical passes. How can this be irrelevant, since the metaphysical fails to remain at the zero of equilibrious truth? Yet awareness of vector equilibrium could not be more important to the cogitative faculty of thought in this entire regard, because it is our individual metaphysical mind that unapparently employs our individual cerebral circuits to reliably cogitate in respect to it to equilibrium. Equilibrium, consequently, would seem to be a great deal more important for us to learn regarding the direction of truths than anything else intellect might consciously anticipate from justice, other than its politically motivated tolerance. Trusting that the PRJMBSC is the exemplary overseer of truth is conceptually different from the Synergetics century SJPMCC. SJPMCC is my most recent clarifying acronym, primarily because the R factor of the PRJMBSC represents centuries of misinformation and disinformation as humans have adapted their indoctrinated perspectives to the magnitude tolerance, thereby subconsciously increasing it. This is without expecting entropy's law of increasing the random element, as human ignorance environmentally increases it by manifesting periodically accumulated degrees of disorder. On a less generalized level of the entire conceptuality, the frequency concentrations of time and energy involve angular modulations. Nonetheless, in total, it must reach a tolerance magnitude limit before entropically transforming the reforming environments. For almost inexplicable reasons, our humanity would be better off understanding that universe is both metaphysical and physical, and that dimensions may only be expressed in magnitudes of time and energy. Our metaphysical awareness is the identity of weightless life. Our physical anatomy, as is true for all physical special case systems, is a rebuildable device. Synergetics 326.40 and 527.03. Synergetics awareness evolution's progressive reduction of error invites a very different way of observing the reenacting articulations, gathering relevant information, and solving local problems. Angle and frequency modifications are the only two possible covariables that are operative in all design and universe. There is a difference between modification and modulation. Modulations are selectable and predictable. Modification in Webster's Collegiate Dictionary, 10th edition, is the result of a change. In an organism, the change is caused by environmental factors. So if universe equal environment plus system, that's U equal E plus S, angular modulations apparently can be governed by intellect to whatever extent that the superficial acceleration permits, whereas modifying as design science potential awareness eventually correlates to the recognition of the only two possible covariables that are operatives in all design and universe. As a synergetically informed consideration, the modification of angle and frequency may very well correlate to evolution awareness of the operational field complex, the isotopic vector matrix, a cosmic hierarchy. See color plate 9. Let us not forget that the time dimension is frequency. Synergetics 960.07. With it in mind, at least one would expect justice in the SJPMCC context could be deeply concerned about the conceptual complex's sum of all interrelationships and the multidimensionality of scenario universes' systemic environments. Then the vectorial geometry field's cosmic matrix would eventually be economically recognized as an education ideal regarding truth. decreasing the magnitude tolerance of the residual inaccuracies of observation and or articulation, would consciously involve imagination's ability to formulate conceptually, by obsoleting the cultivated tolerance for the erroneously contrived purely imaginary origins, from which the religion interpretation of God permits the belief system to perpetuate the lies. Instead, the precedent-setting preferences of previous experience can actually supplant the truth as predetermined randomly occurring series of events without awareness of evolutionary accumulation in respect to the system's expansion-contraction rates of change. Expansion is radial, and time is the radial dimension, whereas concentration is circumferential, and most definitively relates to awareness of syntropy and entropy, the in, out, and around experiences, which the vector equilibrium jitterbug model, as a referential involvement frame, superficially demonstrates. It is superficial because it does not show the complexity of the entire nuclear group. It is always a case of expanding physical universe and contracting metaphysical universe to every reformable degree of understanding universe systems and environment, its environmentally derived systems. Since we have this equanimity model, to which our individual systemic thought refers, imaginably the vector equilibrium, which is the same as ideal and also is the equanimity model, very well may be what the uncorrupted, balanced mind of justice has disallowed its own recognition. Does the misconception of information go this deeply into the potentiality of the metaphysical generalized conceptioning fields of thought? Then what are we facing? In the Synergetics centuries, SJPMCC must be vastly different from the PRJMBSC respecting the truth of the eternal omniscient mind versus the purely imaginary inadequately derived inventions of God and images of God to all degree of such magnitude tolerance. It very well may be the omniscient mind self-testing our intelligent human species that could have been beamed here for such experimental trial and error survival proclivities respecting truth and evolution rates of change and the numbers. If so, it is always regarding metaphysical self-remodifying and physical self-retransforming. The conceptuality of the absolute continuous complex process requires a referential matrix field that is conceptual by the non-mathematically oriented and the intuitively mathematical. Complex number arrangements can be so formidable to some of us from childhood, and when further combined with rapidly developing computer technology, while imposing antiquated belief system adaptations, replete with yet a different reality basis concerning what the PRJMBSC prefers as its precedent-setting basis. Then the entire matter is so contradictory, it actually instigates the self-defeating culmination suffered upon our humanity. Our humanity subconsciously trusts the PRJMBSC without actually identifying it as an intercontradictory event field compared to the cosmically total truth of universes metaphysically, theoretical, and physically realized vectorial geometry, referential to nature's coordinate system. PRJMBSC, which we know is politics, religion, justice, military, belief system complex, as a matter of concern, can invalidate whatever it deems to be a threat to its system's survival on the basis of any belief system's invention of God, But as we conceptualize the closest packing spheres of nature's coordinate system, while evolution awareness is mindful of the vector equilibrium, then zero pulsation in the vector equilibrium, which is the closest approach to eternity, and universe's omniscient mind obviously is not the God of the variously manifested religions of the world, who have for centuries, over thousands of years, preached and indoctrinated for proselytizing objectives, promoting God thus. God is their punitory judge. He inflicts punishment, penalizes to the extremes of impalement that is still brought into play as the sword strikes and torturous conditions are imposed on human beings. What if the omniscient mind's eternal integrity is such sublime mathematics that the last thing its eternal intellect could possibly impose on our self-testing, trial and error, local problem-solving species is punishment in any form? Is this because the reactions to it never really garner any regenerating equanimity? Punishments, ramifying culminations, engender instability at every level of the complex interactions known as cycles. When justice is entrusted as the overseer who favors its precedent-setting, previously experienced, supposedly resolved cases, it inadvertently advocates ignoring any other possibility. One such possibility is a rudimentary awareness of the only two possible covariables that are operatives in all design and universe. Recently, we know this to be angle and frequency modification. Why not experimentally yield to this truth with hopes of reducing the magnitude tolerance of the residual inaccuracies of observation and/or articulation, since and after all the articulations are ever reenacted each time, hoping to reduce the magnitude tolerance of the residual inaccuracies of observation and/or articulation. Can we forever use God as a savior to save us from the inherited ignorance? Is this truly what religion was invented for? To impose a punitory God on mankind on one side of its face, and a forgiving God on the other side of its two-faced personality? The continuity of conscious life becomes personality as a product of complex periodic interactions known as cycles and/or periodic recurrences of a higher frequency order, are Buckminster Fuller's total thinking. When does this not apply to the human mind's metaphysical identity of all the weightless life? If the human mind is permitted to conceptualize a systemic environment, its zero pulsations, why would this closest approach to eternity and the omniscient mind's universe, which is a total reality of universal principles, be less desirable than the purely imaginary religion God, whose primary purpose is to facilitate and accommodate self-other ruination? It is ruination that supplants the truth of our evolution awareness most economical way of behaving relative to unity and self in universe. Thank you.